All right, this is a this is a video that I've been looking forward to making for a very long time. I finally broke down and bought a prop that I have been waiting for a very long time. I made a video back in the Pleistocene era about explaining gospel topics with a pendulum. It's a slideshow video. I would say that's probably one of the most important videos on my channel so far, but I am very biased, so you might not agree. Anyway, if you haven't seen that, you should watch it. Maybe I'll even put a link in the description. But this video is called Explaining Gospel Topics with a Chinese Fan. And I think you're still allowed to say that. This is literally a Chinese fan. It's made in China. But it's one of these deals. Have you seen something like this before? And the reason I had to make this video today, even though I wasn't planning on doing it today, is because my kids keep messing with this and it's about to break for good. It's been sitting on my kitchen table for a while, reminding me that I need to make this video. So I broke down, I bought this thing off of Amazon, and it's falling apart. I have to hold it with my hand so that the little spindle doesn't fall out. Anyway, all right, so what's the big deal with this? All right, when this thing is folded up, it's nice and tight, obviously, right? So I'm gonna just describe some obvious properties of this thing, and then I'll apply it to some gospel topics. I should just say topics about reality, because that's more accurate. The gospel is everything. Everything is contained in the gospel. So when this is close together, if you're holding it just like this, the fins are indistinguishable, right? But this isn't the fan's like true form. When it's expanded out, it's way different. So things that were very close together when it's folded become very far apart. There's a differentiation, right? And it's broad. It's not a narrow difference. But there's some relationship between these, and you can see it because my kids have already sort of busted it up. These things are actually, you see that fishing line? Sorry, I almost told you a little story about watching The Wizard of Oz with my young son. So this line here, you might not see it far away, but there's structure to this. These things are interrelated, they're connected. But when this thing's folded up, you can't really tell what those connections are. These fins are adjacent, but its structure just really isn't obvious. Now, I didn't pick this thing out for any reason except it was the cheapest one on Amazon, least expensive. But it actually has this intricate pattern on it, which is unexpected. But once again, when it's folded up, you can't see that, right? Okay, so what does this have to do with the gospel? And maybe I'll actually manage to make a short video. Well, through small and simple things, the Lord brings to pass great things. It turns out that across a diversity of topics, there are these patterns that apply regarding differences between entities or ideas or people, whatever, experiences that seem much more similar than they actually are. So it's like this. In fact, as humans, our default assumption is that pretty much everything is pretty much the same as everything else. Now, in me saying that, you might dispute that and say, no, but what about this? But what about this? Just bear with me for a second. It's relative. Relative to what I'm about to tell you is actually the way things are. So, how you see things now is probably like this. Now, there are going to be some people who have had different, we'll just say greater experience in life. And God has differentiated more for you because you've been through some really terrible things. That's really what does it. I'm ruining my own punchline here, but for the most part, most people are absolutely clueless about the number of different options in life, the value of each of them. So, back to this fan. So let's talk about career options, right? That's a nice temporal sounding application. So when you ask young people, what do you want to do for a living, which I've done many hundreds of times, they'll give you like 3 options, right? You'll just hear the same things over and over from people. And you get a picture that looks like this. The reason is they have no idea that career options are like this. Now, our society is in decline, and it's terminal decline. That's bad news. I'm not going to cushion it. But the good news is there are vast differences still in the options that people choose. So if you want to become a computer programmer, and I think, to be totally honest, we're on the tail end of that being a good idea. As someone who's been in that field for 20 years, I think at the moment we probably have too many people in that field. I think there's going to be a big contraction in that space. COVID just went a little crazy with salary increases in that field, and I think a lot of the tech companies are and will continue to cut back. But anyway, there are many fields that are just going to be in higher demand in the near future. They're mostly trades. So this is actually pretty good news, because for most of those things you can get paid internships and go into it straight out of high school. So things like plumbing, machining, carpentry, and so on. Electricians and HVAC technicians. That's big money, folks. And what's more, it gives you freedom to live in places that you actually might want to live. You're not going to be trapped in a big city doing those things. You also don't have to go to college, which is increasingly valuable. So for reasons that I won't get into right this second, because I'm already droning on too long about career options, but my point is, most people that think that they know about this, they're still looking at this picture. And they think that option A is here, option B is here, and option C is here. And at the end of the day, sure, one might be better, but by how much? It's not really that much better, and they're wrong, okay? And this, we've just talked about breadth so far. The other factor with this is that as this expands, this analogy falls apart. It's limited in utility, but as things expand, there's also a shifting. Some things move from the good side to the bad side. Now, I've talked about that extensively in other videos in the Glory of God's Intelligence, so I'm not going to drone on about that. We're just going to focus on breadth. But the switch happens, so you need to be aware of that. So what you choose in a fan type situation, it could make all the difference in the world, because this is nowhere near this. They are completely opposite, right? All right, what's another situation? Actually, before we get to another situation, one thing that's quite important to talk about is, what is this? What makes this happen? And I mentioned suffering. So in Hebrews, we read that the Lord learned obedience through the things that he suffered. And that translation will do. It's not the best conceptualization of what was meant to be there, but Jesus himself learned through suffering. So what he learned, that's a topic for another day, but awareness, you could just put it under the umbrella of awareness. So as you learn more about how things are for real, that's what opens the fan. you could use a lot of analogies to describe this. You're climbing higher up the tree, and so you can see more of your surroundings. But the point is, you know more about more things. That falls into two categories. One is the options that exist, like what they are, and two is what each one is worth. So what's the net benefit of each one? You need to know the cost and the benefit to know the net benefit. So people, going back to the career one, they think, oh, well, this aspect of this job is good. This aspect of this job is bad. But their list is always incomplete and incorrect. And so as they get into it, they find out the truth, and the truth is different than what they thought. And sometimes it turns out better than what you thought, but that's not usually the case. It's almost always the case that you need more information up front to end up in a situation that's better than what you thought it would be, not less information. So in another way of phrasing that is, random guesses are almost never better. And the more complicated the situation, the less likely a random choice is to be optimal. Okay, so what's another situation? So we talked about career. What about joy? So any decision you might have to make, you're going to look at the options and say, which of these is going to lead to the greatest joy? Well, maybe you won't say that, but you should say that. So this again, people think, well, clearly one of these is a better choice, but I don't think it's really going to matter all that much in the end. Like, what does it matter if I eat just a little too much at dinner? What does it matter if I pick the second best job I could do? Or I date the person that's not really the one for me, but you know, good enough for now, or whatever, right? These are all very life-oriented, temporal kind. You probably don't think of these as spiritual choices, but it all matters. It all matters. Joy isn't a spiritual choice, is it? I mean, it is, but it's only a spiritual choice because it's the whole of everything. I guess what I'm trying to say is people make an artificial separation and it hurts them. It really does. You have to choose the absolute best all the time. That's the only path towards the best outcome holistically, right? So if you think the gospel is some workaround so that you can do less than the best and end up with the best, you're wrong. That's not the way it works. It's a method, it's a system that helps you to obtain the best by doing the best. And the workaround isn't getting you out of having to make the best choice. It's working around the fact that you don't know what the actual best is, but through God, you can have a path to the actual best through what you sincerely believe is best right now. That's the workaround. That's the grace. Anywho, so joy. So people think that their choices are pretty narrow in terms of outcome, but really it goes like this. Okay? And heaven and hell is like that too. So what you think of as hell, it's nothing compared to what hell is actually like. And what you think of as heaven is nothing compared to what heaven is actually like. And we could go through this with people. And that's really important. I'm going to spend many pages talking about differences in people because it matters a lot, it turns out. So just the briefest of brief examples. This is kind of how people think of the distribution of good and bad people in this world. And this isn't as articulate as it could be because I'd say that most people think that most people are normal. And technically, the definition of the word normal, that's exactly what they are. But my point is, and I'll show this in much greater detail in some slides as well later on, is really way broader than you think. It's way broader than you think, okay? And so the people that you think are decent, they just haven't been put into a situation yet, or you haven't, where you can see what they're really like. So what do I mean by that? Let's use the example of Jesus. And he lived in a village for 30 years that was tiny. And everybody knew each other. But then when he went off and started doing miracles in another town, when he came back, they were all shocked. They couldn't believe that this was the guy who they had known their whole lives. They couldn't believe it. So the question is, how the heck did they miss that? Now, a lot of people say stuff like, oh, he wasn't healing the sick and raising the dead back at home. So? He was the same guy, right? His progression was line upon line just like everybody else's. In that respect, it was just like everybody else. It was different in that he never chose to sin. But he still grew line upon line. There are many scriptures that illustrate that. So how did they mess that up so badly? Well, they were going off of this model. I guarantee you, if you could get in a time machine and go back to when Jesus was 29, and you went around and interviewed the people in his town, you could ask them all kinds of questions. If you knew what holiness was and what its markers are, you could ask them all kinds of questions about this guy Jesus, because they all knew him. And they would give you all the right answers that show up as the right color on the litmus test of holy, holy, holy. Okay? But they really thought that everyone was pretty much the same. And so even if they understood which side was which on this, which they probably wouldn't, and even if they saw as good the things that were good about Jesus, they would totally miss out on this. They totally would have missed it. And so basically what he did in his 3-year mission was this, with his life. He spread himself out, opened himself up, and demonstrated his goodness to people so that they could see how the Father was good. That's what he said. He came to show how the Father was. And so in all these situations in life, he just overtly demonstrated what righteousness would do in that situation. And Jesus was on one extreme of this. In the last days, so this is heads up, I'm about to give you some end times stuff you might not know. In the last days, we're going to get the other example, the man of sin. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about what Paul was talking about when he was talking about that, but Jesus was the epitome of good in a man during his mortal mission. And in our day, we will see the epitome of evil in a man, in this man of sin figure. There's a lot of other names for this guy. But what happens is, when I say awareness, typically we're talking about an individual's awareness. There's also collective awareness. And this is happening right now across the world. Because God has been for some time in this process of winding up the years of this earth's existence by pouring out truth on the world. And that is in the last stages now. So I'm not saying it's going to end at the end of next week or something. I'm saying the rate at which God is pouring out information that was previously not seen or understood is accelerating. And that's what causes this to happen. These things that I've mentioned, not careers per se, that's indirectly related, but these ideas about joy and sorrow, which I didn't talk about, but that's obviously the other side. Joy and sorrow, and truth and error, which we didn't talk about, but you can now imagine that. So ideas have different worth, different accuracy, as with respect to reality, and people especially people, they're all tied together with the end times, because this is what's happening. All right. Now, another thing I have to say, just to encourage you, is that as the fan fans out, and you can tell I love doing that. It's the little things, folks. You gotta take your joy where you can find it. As the world fans out, what's going to happen, getting back to people, because that's the most important of all those ideas I shared. As this happens, these people are going to find out who they are. And right now, they think they're like this. So let me hit you with a couple of weird things that you might be surprised to hear. There is a way of seeing these people. And the way to see these people, and actually everyone through to here, is to be one of these people. It takes one to know one. Another way of putting this is the higher you are in awareness, the more you will see, because you see everything below you. I put that into air quotes because we're speaking symbolically here, but the Lord is above all, and his house is a hierarchy of people. And where you are in that hierarchy determines what you see. And when I say where you are, I just want to put like bold face, double underline. These aren't some kind of weird inherent qualities that you have, whatever. Read Alma 13. It's all about your choices. We all have the same capacity to make choices, and we choose differently. That's what differentiates us. That's what determines where you are. Choices through time. That's it. So that's a topic for another video, how different people choose differently in the same exact situation. It's all over the scriptures. And they react differently to the same exact stimulus. It's all over the scriptures. Anyway, as these people fan out from thinking they're normal to, oh my gosh, I'm a freak, or like, I'm going to do terrible things and take over the world. It's a very lonely journey. But I want to encourage you to go study about Elijah and how deflated he was towards the end of his ministry. And the Lord said that there were thousands of people. Elijah said, I'm all alone and everyone wants to kill me. And the Lord said, there's still thousands of people in Israel who have not bowed the knee to Baal, the false god. But he thought he was all alone. The Lord has a purpose in all things. And if I had more time, I'd explain to you exactly why these people feel they're all alone and exactly how that comes to an end. But I don't have time right now. So as you move, don't be afraid to be who you are, unless you're on this side of the fan, and then you should be afraid of who you are and you should repent. All these people need to repent, but these people should definitely be worried about who they are. But if you feel yourself inclining towards these things, just embrace it. I wrote a chapter once called something like Dance to the Music in Your Heart. That's what I was talking about. See, as someone to whom God has given vision, I do see these people. And society walks around like this. But I see this. And the things that I've gone through give me ways of discerning this. It's like a constantly running litmus test. And I can see and even feel where people are on here. And I share this just because there's nothing special about how I came to be able to do that. It's a process that's open to everyone. And when you do that, as you do that, part of your job is to help make a way for those who need help getting to who they really are. And so I hope that this is encouraging in some way to help illustrate that there is a huge diversity of options in life that extends far beyond our common vision of it, our common sense of it. and that these options carry consequences that massively exceed what people think. And they all matter an awful lot. So as you wend your way through life, don't hold up this pattern as what you expect. Expect this. Blurring out many details, I will tell you a story from my own life. And once, when I was reflecting with the Lord about some issues, some struggles that I was going through, and I really struggled to see how the options before me were worth the cost that I was going through. And the Lord said to me, just imagine being in the greatest pain that you can imagine, on a very general sense of the word, enveloping anything you could apply the word to, physical, spiritual, emotional, everything. And imagine the Lord saying this to you in that situation. He said, which again, he always surprises me with the things he says. But he said, I want you to imagine the best thing you could possibly imagine coming as a result of all of this. And in that state, it was the most ridiculous thing someone could say to me, because I was flooded with the greatest pain I had ever experienced to that point. But he's God. And so I instantly believed him, and I said, okay. And I sort of set aside all the blocks that would prevent me from trusting him enough to open to that. And I imagined the greatest thing that I could, which was absurd. It seemed so unlikely. And he said, what I have planned for you is better than that. So trust me. And it's really important to trust God. It's really important. So I don't know if this helps you, but there are people in this world right now who are exceptional individuals. They're really good people. And they just haven't been activated yet. Not fully. But the Lord is going to work on you. He's going to breathe on you. That's scriptural symbology. He will impart to you experiences and information that show you who you really are and why you're really here. And you were born here for a specific time and a specific reason. And he'll show you what that is. And this is true of many people at many levels of content, intensity, fulfillment. But we are in the last days, and the Lord has populated the earth. He has seeded the earth with his army. And his army is here for a purpose. And so as these days roll on, we're going to see this group emerge, and we're going to see this group emerge. So get ready.